You know that feeling, right? You're in a conversation, it's all going fine, and then nothing. A dead stop. The air gets thick, and you can practically hear your own brain screaming, say something, anything. So, what is that? Why do we find a simple lack of noise so incredibly awkward? All right, let's get into it. Turns out Mia Wallace really hit on something huge back in 1994. This feeling, it's not just in your head. It's a super deep-seated human response, like a social alarm bell that people have studied, analyzed, and, yep, even weaponized. But to really understand it, we've got to first agree on what it even is. Because, it's so much more than just a pause. It's this moment that's just loaded with anxiety and this overwhelming pressure to fill the void. So, at its core, an awkward silence is basically a conversational hiccup that just feels wrong. It's when a pause stretches out just a little too long and it breaks these unwritten rules of talking, leaving us feeling exposed and, frankly, pretty unsure of ourselves. The real question is, what's going on in our brains during that gap? Okay, so think of a good conversation not just as trading information, but more like a cooperative activity, kind of like a dance. When it's going well, there's a rhythm, a flow, and our brains absolutely love that. When a conversation is in flow, everything's coordinated and predictable. There's this smooth back and forth that just feels pleasant, feels harmonious. But when that flow gets disrupted by a sudden, weird silence, it becomes disfluent. And that feels unsettling because deep down, our brain reads that break in the rhythm as a potential red flag for conflict or disagreement. In this slide, wow, it really shows you what's at stake. A 2011 study confirmed all of this. Just look at the table on the screen. When conversational flow is high, our feelings of belonging, our self-esteem, that feeling of social validation, it's all way up. But when that flow gets choppy, those good feelings totally plummet, and that feeling of rejection just skyrockets. So how long does it take for this alarm to go off? Get this, it takes just 4 seconds. That's it. The same study found that a silence of only 4 seconds is enough to trigger these feelings of anxiety and rejection. That is an incredibly fast response, which tells you just how hardwired we are to the rhythm of talking to each other. So you see, it's not just about the silence itself. It's about the fact that the silence breaks a rule we didn't even know we were following. And this is where a really cool communication theory comes into play. It's explained by something called expectancy violations theory. Here's how it works. First, we go into every conversation with this kind of unwritten script in our heads about how it's supposed to go. Second, something happens that breaks that script, like a sudden silence. And third, our brains instantly switch into detective mode, and we're forced to figure out what that violation means and who caused it. So yeah, that 4-second gap turns all of us into social detectives. We're asking, was that on purpose? Is this a bad sign? Are they bored? Did I say something wrong? The silence isn't empty anymore. It's suddenly filled with 100 negative possibilities, and our brain is scrambling to find an answer. But what if I told you that this entire feeling is a cultural invention? That's right. The deep discomfort we feel in a quiet moment is not a universal human thing. In a lot of places around the world, silence means something completely different. This is often explained by looking at high context versus low context cultures. So in low context cultures like the US or Germany, we expect communication to be really direct, very explicit. Talk is used to fill gaps, and silence is often seen as a failure, a problem. But in high context cultures like in Japan or China, silence is a crucial part of the conversation. It can mean respect or thoughtfulness, or even an understanding so deep that you don't even need words. And the research on this is just perfect. Take a look at these charts from a 2005 study. The chart on the left? That's conversations between Americans. See how the bars, which are the pauses, are few and short? They're actively trying to fill the silence. Now look at the chart on the right with Chinese and Japanese participants. The pauses are way more frequent and consistent. They're totally comfortable with it. To them, it's not awkward, it's just part of the flow. So we know our brain's alarm system and our culture play a huge role. But there is one more piece to this puzzle, and this one's a lot more personal. For many of us, the fear of silence is deeply connected to a fear of being judged. If you answered yes to that, you are definitely not alone. This is the very core of social anxiety. And for someone who feels that, a conversational silence isn't just a pause, it's a spotlight. When the talking stops, that inner critic gets really, really loud. People with social anxiety often have a very self-protective communication style. They're so afraid of being judged that they might not share much about themselves, or they'll struggle to say what they really think. So in a moment of silence, that fear just gets cranked up to 11. They feel the weight of everyone's attention, and they just assume everyone is judging them for not having the perfect thing to say. You know, this quote from a Reddit user just nails it. The awkwardness we feel is often a self-fulfilling prophecy. We think it's awkward, so we act awkward, which, of course, just makes the whole situation feel even more uncomfortable. So how do we break out of this cycle? Well, the key is to completely reframe how we think about silence. It doesn't have to be a conversational failure. In fact, it can be a source of incredible power. Let me introduce you to strategic silence. This is the conscious, intentional use of silence as a communication tactic. Think about it. In a negotiation, it can pressure the other person to sweeten the deal. In an argument, it can make your last point land with so much more weight. It can even show respect, just by giving someone the space to think. It turns silence from something that happens to you into something you do. So here's the big takeaway. Silence is never truly empty. It's like a canvas, and we're the ones who paint its meaning. All that anxiety, the pressure, the awkwardness, that all comes from how we interpret it, which is shaped by our brains, our culture, and our own personal fears. And that brings us right back to where we started. Because Mia Wallace didn't just understand uncomfortable silence, she understood its beautiful opposite, the comfortable silence, the one you share with people you really trust, a silence that isn't filled with judgment, but with connection. And in the end, we actually have a choice. We can hear a threat, a judgment, a failure. Or we can choose to hear an opportunity for thought, for respect, for a deeper kind of connection that doesn't even need words. So the next time the conversation pauses, what meaning will you give to the quiet?